Welcome to Knightline Extra on the award-winning Knightline Sports Network.
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Phegley coming to you from the 1148 studios. This is Knightline Extra from the award-winning Knightline Sports Network. Knightline winners of the Florida BlogCon's favorite podcast of the year, their 8th annual awards. Thank you very much. Happy New Year, Night Nation. As no doubt some of you already are, Trace Trylko is in Arizona for the UCFiesta. Trace will have us covered from the press box, and I'll be taking your calls during a special UCFiesta Bowl edition of Postgame Live. Before the clock strikes midnight on the 31st and we usher in a new year, we have an all-star lineup in place to preview UCF versus LSU. In this extra, we're talking to former UCF quarterback Kyle Israel and Nick Patti. We check in with an LSU insider, CST's Paul Boron, and we catch up with a longtime friend of Knightline, TJ LSU Dad. I told you it was an A-team. Here we go. Welcome to Inside the Huddle with former UCF quarterback Kyle Israel, brought to you by the Little Greek Fresh Grill. Fresh, flavorful, fabulous. Waterford Lakes, 855 North Althea Trail, Orlando. All right, welcome back, Kyle. Kyle, the first thing I want to talk to you about is Dillon Gabriel. Came out of Milani just like Mackenzie Milton. What do you think about him? Have you seen his tape at all?
Yeah, I have seen his tape. I've watched his tape at length, and he was a huge recruit for us and a huge get for UCF. Obviously, some things fell into our place with Georgia being able to flip a quarterback from Ohio State, and Dillon was considering Georgia, and then USC kind of being solidified in that position or potentially going through some level of coaching change in the near future, I think helped in our recruiting process. But Dillon Gabriel on film is a lefty. His first thing you see, extremely talented, has a ton of velocity on the football, a ton of touch. He's thinner than Tua, but he reminds me a little bit of Tua when you watch him throw the football and the way that he kind of contorts his body and is able to make all types of throws. He's obviously talented from an athlete perspective, so he can run. I think he brings maybe not everything that Mackenzie brings to the table from a running perspective, but still enough to be absolutely effective. And so I'm very excited about this signee. I'm very excited about the fact that, you know, we've got essentially a guy who's broken all the records of two of the best quarterbacks in college football. That doesn't mean everything, but it is nice to have that guy in our program, and seemingly to have a quarterback in place for the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit interesting just because, you know, he was the guy that took over for Mackenzie when Mackenzie came here, and now we've got the guy that followed him. It's just weird. You know, I mean, I don't think that happens very often.
No, I don't think it's happened. I certainly not this type of distance. And I think that, you know, obviously the connection to Hawaii with Mackenzie is there. However, it does show where UCF football is, because Dillon was a guy that was committed to Army and didn't have many big-time offers. But once a few schools kind of found out who he was, you know, these Power 5 SEC programs saw Dillon as a guy that they thought that could make their program better. And to have that connection down in Orlando, and to be able to recruit somebody all the way from Hawaii is just a great pipeline for us to have, because some of the best football talent every year and some of the best football talent in the NFL is right from Hawaii, where Mackenzie and Dillon are from.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really happy about it. I was kind of surprised when it happened, but I had heard that it was going to happen. So anyway, moving on, we have a big game coming up. One more day till LSU and UCF in the Fiesta Bowl. What do you know about LSU?
Well, I know that LSU is obviously a very, very talented football team. Now, we're not going to see all of that talent as a number of LSU's defensive starters will not be playing in the game. Some of those guys sitting out for draft purposes, some of those guys missing due to injury. But they are still a very talented football team. They have one of the best recruiting classes in the country, top 10 recruiting classes in the country every year. They are going to come out there and look the part. And I think, frankly, it's a dangerous time period for UCF because this is the type of program that maybe is a little bit frustrated and tired of hearing about UCF and feels like they can do something about it. And I think that LSU they're not, in my opinion, they're not going to go and outscore us, Andrew. They're not going to put up 49 points on us. I don't have that type of fear, but they can control the football. They will establish a running game. And they'll be very hard to beat up front, both on their offense and defensive lines. And so this is a matchup. LSU has lost some big games, obviously getting blown out by Alabama, played Texas A&M all the way to the end in that crazy 7 overtime game. And they're going to be ready to play. I think that it is fair to say, with kind of the attention that UCF has garnered this season, that LSU's football teams, the guys that are playing, are going to be ready. And I think it's going to be a great, great challenge for our program, a great spotlight. And if we win this football game, it will, despite some of the LSU players sitting out, that won't really matter when you talk about the level of talent that LSU has.
I remember last year when we talked, we both were kind of worried about Auburn in that game, and we're proven wrong. I mean, completely, because we handled them pretty easily. Does LSU concern you more than Auburn did last year?
LSU does concern me more, I think, and maybe that's a little bit easier or a little different of a question in hindsight after last season and us winning that game. But, I am concerned about LSU. I think that they have one of the best linebackers in the country. I think Coach Orgeron is not as comfortable in that head coaching position as some may assume he is. So I think from a coaching perspective, LSU is doing everything they can to win this football game. This is very important to Orgeron and his staff. So I am nervous. I am a little bit more confident in our football team, having been on that stage last season and throughout the course of this season, with the number of games we've played that were nationally televised on ABC. I think all those things really help a team's confidence, and I think that we're a very confident football team. But I am nervous, Andrew, about LSU. I am nervous because they have the type of size and players that can establish running games and stop running games. And despite what people may think, UCF's running game certainly is what has given us the advantage in close ball games. And so it'll be interesting to see how our offensive line, who in my opinion needs to have their best game of the year, can do against that LSU front seven.
All right. Well, and we'll talk about that here in just a little while, the offensive line a little bit more. But what concerns you about Darryl Mack going into this? I mean, he had a great game against Memphis in the American Championship game. Did a lot of things that I think that most people didn't expect. He had a couple struggles in the beginning, but he came back and acted like that never even happened. Was just solid as a rock the rest of the game. What concerns you about him having to go on to this stage now after being on that stage and face a team like LSU?
For me, I think it's just focus. I think he proved to me, in particular in that second half, where essentially, despite one throwaway, Mack was perfect in the second half in the conference championship game. I think he didn't complete a pass in the second half under 11 yards, was perfect on third down, really played essentially what I would consider one of the best, if not the best, singular half from a quarterback in our program's history. In that game. And I truly believe that when you just go back and look at the game and statistically and the type of throws he made and the big throws from his own end zone and third down, I mean, he just was phenomenal. And that gives me a lot of faith. However, I am concerned that he's young. I'm concerned that sometimes in bowl games, which I've experienced personally, the focus from the game itself can sometimes go into a different direction. I'm confident in our staff and this team and the leadership of the players are going to keep everybody focused. But that's always a natural concern when you come off a South Florida victory and McKenzie's reeling from his injury and you're in Orlando. For Darriel Mack and that going into the conference championship, I think it was a bit easier to be focused. And maybe he felt some of that pressure where even he didn't know how he was going to possibly perform. I hope that hasn't gone away and that edge hasn't gone away over the last month as things have settled down in this break. But if there is one concern, it is focus, and I'm hoping that the stage just isn't too big for him. We haven't seen him in this environment. It's one thing to be at home in front of 50,000 screaming fans. It's another thing to go on a road with a much bigger stadium on a much bigger stage for the Fiesta Bowl. Can he keep his composure and his poise throughout the course of the game? Is something that I'll be watching, but I have a lot of faith in his ability to play the position.
Well, yeah, one thing that I remember thinking back to last year and McKenzie on that stage, he had a lot of nerves in the beginning, big time.
Yeah.
And he was banged up as well. I don't think Darryl's banged up, so I think that's going to help. But it's a huge stage for such a young guy to come out, only literally starting or playing a couple of games, and so I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens as far as that goes.
I do think you can say there, just a last note about that position in this bowl game. I believe that the outcome, and I could be completely wrong, I'm guessing, and this is my own opinion, but I do think that the outcome of this game and how DJ plays may have something to do with potential graduate transfers coming into UCF next season, as I don't expect or anticipate McKenzie to play next year just based off the injury itself. So I think there's a lot riding on this game, more so for Darriel Mack than really anybody else in this program. And I'm hoping even that doesn't add a level of nervousness as well.
Well, speaking of that really quick, everybody's excited. They think that we're going to get this Fields kid from Georgia, and I don't know about that. I mean, that may be in the works. It may not be. But I went through and I thought about this, and I posted on the Rivals Dungeon board the other day. I don't think that we need a quarterback. We don't need a grad transfer, personally. We have 5 quarterbacks. I mean, McKenzie's not going to play, but come January, just, a couple days away after the bowl game, Dylan Gabriel's going to be here. So that adds another person. He's an early enrollee. We've got Q. We've got, all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that we're okay at quarterback. I think that Darriel Mack is going to do this, and I think that he's going to be everything that he was, that we saw in that Memphis game, personally.
So do I. I do believe that. I think that if we win this game close, Andrew, and we struggle offensively, but because, let's be honest, LSU has a much maligned offense when it comes to being able to score and score quickly. So this could be a game, if we struggle, that's actually very close. It will be interesting at that point if you have a guy like Jalen Hurts or you have a guy like Fields. Those are guys I think you at least have to consider despite what we currently have on the roster here, especially if we're able to win this game, I don't know, in a way that's maybe any win, our fan base to get 26 in a row would be elated by 1 point or more. But I think it's still a bit of an evaluation process whether or not, if we're 26-0 and we have another chance at another run and you got Jalen Hurts saying he wants to transfer in for a year, I don't know if you want to do that to Mac. It could play into recruiting in the future quite a bit, but I don't think it's out of the question at this point in time. And I tend to agree with you that we're probably okay with who we have on the roster. I just think that there are some guys who may look at UCF as a place they want to go play. And when sometimes these talented guys come knocking on your door, it's hard to shut it in their face.
Yeah, I mean, given that, of course, it would be hard to deny Jalen Hurts or this Fields guy because they're so highly rated and they have a little bit of experience and stuff like that. And I guess that's what you want. The thing that everybody responded to me on that thing was there's nobody, behind Darriel Mack that has any snaps. And I understand that. There was nobody behind McKenzie this year that had any snaps, really. So I can go both ways on that one. So
it'll be a lot. This game will certainly have a lot to do with how that particular situation unfolds. There's no doubt.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you would want to do that to the psyche, I guess, of DJ. I don't know if you would want to do that. I mean, maybe to have competition, but I mean, do you bring in a big guy like that and then the competition gets weird? And I don't know. Do you ruin Mac's career for the rest of his college time by him being upset or whatever? So there's a lot involved in all that stuff, and I will, I'm just going to let Heupel and his staff deal with that and not give my opinion too much until we see something happen, I guess.
I'll take the same stance.
It's kind of a difficult thing. I mean, you don't want to mess up what he's got going on, because we weren't sure at all about him. We had seen his tape, and his tape was incredible. But then, you heard things, and why wasn't he, coming in and providing a little bit more comfort and all that stuff all the way through the preseason, all the way, we thought about this and talked about this. So anyway, all right. Well, you talked about the offensive line earlier, and they have to have an incredible game against these guys. What do they have to do specifically? What can they do to win this game for UCF?
Well, they certainly have to give Darryl a pocket when there's only 4 or 5 rushers. Our offensive line has got to be able to do that. If LSU is able to create pressure with 4 down linemen and maybe 1 extra blitzer, we're going to be in for a long day. And I think that's where our offensive line has to play its best, is in the passing game when we know we have to throw the football and we don't have really play action or anything else to help disguise what we're doing. It's just mano-a-mano. We got to throw it on 3rd and 10. LSU's going to peel their ears back and drop into coverage and rush forward. Can we stop their 4 best defensive linemen? I think that's one of the big areas of the game that we're going to want to watch from an offensive line perspective. And then can they get to the second level to block LSU's linebackers in the running game? You look at Greg McCrae and really all of our running backs, the success that they've had recently, they've been running through really big holes. And they've made great moves at the second level and created touchdowns for themselves. But our offensive line is providing them a path where they're not getting touched. They're having to make moves in the last couple of games for, 5 to 8 yards. And LSU's just a better team than what we face, certainly at the linebacker position. And that may be the strength of their entire football team. So in the run game, can the offensive line work up to that second level, get a body on the linebackers, and create a little bit of space for Greg McCrae and those guys to make some magic happen? The passing game on 3rd down when LSU is rushing 4, and can we get to the second level of linebackers in the running game? That will be the biggest question mark for me about our offensive line, and one of the biggest factors in what I think will be a very good football game.
Well, the defensive line is my big question mark. And it's just they've been a bipolar defense the entire year. That's what I'm coining it right now, bipolar. Because it's one thing in the first half, it's another thing in the second half. This is a thing where we can't get behind. I don't think that you can give LSU the opportunity in that first half to get ahead. We can't get down by 17 like we did with Memphis.
Unless we are more talented than what we think we are even, it'd be hard to ever come back for this football team down 17 points. And I agree with you there. So, certainly being able to create some turnovers for our defense is going to be crucial. And our defensive line, they've got to play stout. They got to play stout right away. And they need to come out. There's a lot of senior talent on that defensive line that needs to play essentially the best games of their careers. You need great leadership. You need Pat to be in there at the linebacker position, in short yardage to stuff holes, and then get some of the younger guys in there with more speed at the linebacker level. To help our defense. That's always seemed to be the adjustment in the second half of these football games, is getting some of the younger, faster talent in. I hope we can do that early on in the game, but there's no doubt that going down 2 scores is not an option to a team like LSU, despite how many players they have sitting out. And they are thin. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if I were LSU fan, Andrew, and we beat them, I would say, dude, we miss 6 players on defense. They're starting. It's legitimate.
They'll be saying
it's a legitimate thing.
Yeah, they'll be saying it.
I would say the same if I were them. And I'll always say, that certainly helps. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, if we can't stop the run, we won't win this football game, and we've got to do that early on, like you said. And so I'm hoping we see a big day by the guys up front, a nice rotation, keeping guys fresh, and creating a turnover or two, and that could be the difference.
All righty. Well, I was going to ask you about keys to the game on offense or defense, but I think we just talked about it. So
I think we hit them all.
Yeah, I don't think that we need to go there. I haven't talked to you in a little while. It's been a couple weeks, and I know that you were going to be busy at the Little Greek. How's that going?
Yes. So actually, our Lee Vista location was delayed essentially for the month once we got into the holidays. So we'll be opening that location on the 12th of January, which really hurt my potential plans to get out to Arizona initially, not knowing when that store opening was going to take place. But right now we've got 8 new stores for 2019 lined up. If you count that I'm at all those for 3 weeks straight, that's about 24 weeks out of the 52 this year that I'm going to be at a restaurant opening. So I'm excited about the growth and not excited about the crazy work hours, but things are going very, very well right now.
All righty. Well, you have a happy new year. Thank you very much for doing this the entire year, and look forward to talking to you after the bowl game.
Sounds good, Andrew. You have a happy new year as well. Hope all the listeners do, and let's go Knights.
All right, just a little reminder, don't forget to call in and listen to Knightline postgame live immediately following the Fiesta Bowl. We want your reaction to what we hope is UCF's 26th win in a row, which would mean back-to-back 13-0 seasons. Save our number in your phone's contacts and call us from Glendale after the game or wherever you're listening and watching. 407-401-9184, 407-401-9184. Listen on YouTube. Up next, we get the latest on the Tigers, and later we're inside the red zone with Nick, Patti, plus TJ, LSU Dad, hops on the Knightline hotline. But first, a word from one of our many loyal partners, as this UCF Fiesta version of Knightline Extra continues in just a minute.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Knightline and Knightline Postgame Live. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
You've heard us talk about the great food at our good friend Kyle Israel's restaurant, the Little Greek Fresh Grill. The Little Greek now has franchises available. Please call 407-697-2272. That's 407-697-2272 to see what the Little Greek can do for you. Also, check out the Little Greek's newest location at 6536 Old Brick Road in Windermere, Florida. The Little Greek Fresh Grill. Fresh, flavorful, fabulous.
Five questions with an insider. Getting to know this week's opponent.
All right, our next guest is Paul Boron. Paul covers LSU and the Saints for CST in New Orleans. You've heard him on here a couple times with our Built by UCF guys on the Saints roster. All right, hey, Paul, thank you very much for joining us. How you doing tonight?
My pleasure, Andrew, and I'm doing great. Right in the middle of bowl season, so best time to watch college football.
Absolutely. Well, you cover LSU, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. What can you tell us about LSU?
Well, I think season thumbnail, it probably turned out better than they expected. I think when they went into camp, a lot of people thought it was a 7-win team, maybe 8 wins at the most. Then they got off to a quick start, and then they lost to Florida, and they kind of seemed like maybe they were going to go the other way. But, you know, they rebounded. They had some good wins. They beat some good teams, and then they lose to Alabama like everybody else does. And then, you know, the heartbreaker at the end of the year for them, a game that, you know, if you talk to the LSU fans, they certainly had some calls go against them in that 7 overtime game against Texas A&M that could have changed the fate of that game and could have changed maybe where LSU ended up. But I think one way or the other, they were going to be in the New Year's Six Bowl, as it turned out. And so now they look forward to playing on New Year's Day against, obviously, a very good UCF team.
Well, you're familiar with UCF as well. What do you think of the matchup?
Well, I think it's interesting in a lot of ways. I mean, LSU, obviously, the vaunted defense over the years, and obviously UCF's explosive offense. You know, there is something to it. I know UCF fans don't necessarily like to hear this, but, you know, I think a lot of this game will depend on how engaged LSU is. And that doesn't disparage if UCF wins. You know, I know that came up last year against Auburn too, but, you know, I think if UCF comes into this game and they jump out 10-0, I don't know how much, you know, engagement and heart you'll see from LSU to fight their way back, I guess is the best way to put it. So I think if both teams come engaged, which, you know, UCF's going to, I think it on paper seems like it could be one of the best games of the bowl season.
Yeah, there's been some pretty bad ones as of late.
Yeah.
The American definitely is not doing good in the bowl games.
No, and that's got to be a little bit of a concern too, because you know, some of the teams that UCF beat, you know, have not shown up very well in the bowl games. You know, Memphis had a great game, but not the result, obviously. So, yeah, it's interesting to see how it'll all shake out.
Who are some of the offensive stars that we need to look out for?
Well, obviously UCF has shown a little bit of a weakness against the run, so I guess that's probably where we got to start. The quarterback, Joe Burrow, is an excellent runner. In fact, we've joked that at times it seemed like Ed Orgeron and the offense seemed to forget they had running backs. They would just run Joe Burrow almost like a quarterback keeper or a quarterback draw. But they do have capable running backs. They got Leonard Fournette's little brother, Leonard Fournette. Nick Brissett is a tremendous bruising running back who's in his last game. You'd think he'd have something to show. So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup on offense, just how LSU can get that running game going against maybe the one thing that is a question mark for UCF defensively.
Okay. And what about the defensive stars?
You got to start right in the middle with Devin White. He's an All-American. He won the Butkus. The dude is a game changer, and I love the fact that he's actually playing in this game because he's going to be a high draft pick. And unlike Greedy Williams, who is not going to play in this game because he's a top 10 pick and decided to follow the trend that we're seeing in college football of not playing in the bowl game, that's a huge guy that's going to be missing from the defense. In fact, I heard a stat the other day. When you figure that in and Ed Alexander is not going to play, it would appear due to a suspension, the starting defense that LSU had in week 1 against Miami to now, there's only 4 guys that will start against UCF. So that's quite the turnover from the beginning of the year, but that doesn't mean they don't have a ton of talent. Devin White is phenomenal. The linebacking core is really good altogether. Grant Delpit is a guy certainly in the back end to keep an eye out for as well. He's been a ball hawk all season long.
All right, so those are pretty much the players that aren't playing for LSU. I know there was a couple players that weren't playing. Are those pretty much the guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think unless there's any sort of late suspensions, I mean, the 2 are Ed Alexander and Greedy Williams, and Greedy Williams is a big one because he will be a top 10 NFL pick. So,
yeah, that's cool.
Obviously, a couple guys that will be missing, but still plenty of might on LSU.
What would you say the keys to the game for LSU would be to beat UCF on the offense?
On offense, I think obviously getting that run game going. They've got a very capable tight end in Foster Morrow. I don't know size-wise what UCF's corners are like, but LSU has a couple of really tall receivers, including Stephon Sullivan. So that could be an interesting matchup, the tall receivers for LSU. But I think it all starts with getting the run game going. Quarterback Joe Burrow is not flashy throwing the ball, but he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I think he only has 4 interceptions all year, I think, if I'm correct on that. So he has had a really good year, steady. High completion percentage, but he's not going to wow you. But again, when you throw in the fact that he can run the ball as well, he's going to be the key for LSU.
Okay.
And he's gonna want to go out on a high too. He transferred from Ohio State, so this is his last year. So he's gonna really want to show up, you would imagine.
How does LSU stop the offense of UCF? I mean, it's a little bit of a different offense than they're used to seeing in the SEC.
Well, yeah, obviously that tempo that UCF plays with is unlike anybody has played with in the SEC. I mean, we saw maybe a little bit of it at Ole Miss with Hugh Freeze. They were kind of up-tempo, but, I mean, UCF's in another galaxy when it comes to that. But, I think obviously the X factor is McKenzie not playing, obviously, and Daryl Mack obviously has shown some talent, but there's a big difference between the LSU Tiger defense and the Memphis Tiger defense. So they're probably going to try and bring some heat on him and see what he can do. And I think if he can stand in there and make plays, UCF certainly can move the ball against LSU, but it's going to be a matter of, maybe Mac not getting a little jittery in the face of all the pressure that LSU defense can bring.
You mentioned earlier that you thought that LSU might be a little bit more engaged possibly than Auburn was last year, or their fans say they were or weren't.
Right.
So do you think that LSU maybe – I know that teams kind of want to shut UCF and their fans up. Do you think, it is what it is. We've become kind of the most hated fan base in all of college football and one of the most hated teams. So do you think that... And
isn't that a funny thing from a team that just 2 years ago was 0-12 that probably was a non-factor to now suddenly they're public enemy number one, especially, obviously down here in the heart of SEC country. You said it right. There are a lot of people that would love for LSU to shut UCF up, but they've got to prove it, and they've got to come out engaged and want to do it. I think whether you buy the conspiracy theories or whatever, that's why I thought the Florida UCF Peach Bowl matchup would have been just such a tremendous matchup, and not to mention it would have packed the place. But Florida fans, and I can speak from experience because I went to Florida, not that excited about playing Michigan, whereas I think whether Florida's administration, as I've heard conspiracy theorists say, didn't want to play UCF, I think the fan bases wanted it. I think everybody would have loved to have seen that matchup because Florida's tired of playing Michigan. It's the third time in 4 years. So I think you had a built-in rivalry of guys who have gone against each other in high school, and I think that would have made for a more compelling matchup. Will LSU have that same kind of feeling towards UCF is the point I'm getting to. And I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure they have had a lot of their friends. And, look, a lot of Louisiana guys have gone to Alabama, and I'm sure that they're friends with LSU guys after last year would be like, hey, do us a favor, knock UCF off,
Yeah. Well,
so we'll see. Well, LSU is a very good team, but there's been times where they have not looked good. So they've certainly got to come to play. If they think they're just going to knock UCF off the pedestal, that's not the way it's going to happen. UCF obviously is an outstanding football team, and if LSU doesn't give it their all, they're going to get knocked off just like Auburn did last year, just like Baylor did back in the day at the very same Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, and I think that's, we've kind of been outed now that we can go and beat these teams that people think that we can't. So
right.
The secret is out, I guess, so I would hope that LSU would prepare like they're playing anybody else. I want to see a good game. That's what we want. We want to see a good game. Blowout bowl games are boring,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Even though it's nice to be on the good side of a blowout, obviously, but it doesn't make for very exciting football for sure.
And again, look, LSU has had a long time to stew about this Texas A&M game too, and that's the other interesting part is, they've had a long time off.
Yeah.
And so how this goes too in bowl games, when there's not any sort of pressure, I guess. Like Coach O's not on the hot seat now because he had a good year. They're probably going to come out with some gimmick plays that we've never seen LSU run, because they've had whatever it is now. By the time they play 7 weeks or something since LSU has played, so the playbook's going to be wide open too. So that could make things interesting as well. I think it's going to be a really fun game.
Absolutely. What do you think that the turnout is going to be for this game? I feel like I've heard a lot about the LSU fans really traveling well.
Yeah, they're. I would contend that they are as good a traveling fan base as there is in college football. I mean, it doesn't matter the game. There are always thousands of LSU fans, and we saw it in short distances, like when they opened the season against Miami and Texas, and there's a huge LSU fan base, and that was easy to get to. But even a couple of years ago when they played up at Lambeau against Wisconsin, it was a healthy contingent of LSU fans. So there's no doubt that they will bring a ton of fans. And so that part will be interesting, and who knows if that inspires them, although Auburn had a ton of fans last year, and I don't know if they were particularly inspired. So it's really all about the players and how driven they are. And you would think if you've got a healthy contingent of 30,000 fans or whatever there, that you want to perform for your fan base. So I would think that there's going to be a huge amount of fans, and it's I think there's intrigue to this too. Now I think LSU, going back to the previous point where Florida not as excited to play Michigan, I think LSU was kind of hoping that they were going to play Michigan because they've never played. So I know that matchup certainly would have excited fans, but I think you can be pretty sure that there's going to be 25 to 30,000 LSU fans for sure there, because they travel like I've rarely seen in college football. The only other kind of teams I've seen that travel that much are teams like, Alabama, obviously. Wisconsin is a big one that travels a lot, but LSU is right up there when it comes to putting butts in the seats, even on the road.
I'm looking on ESPN.com here, and it says there's 2,500 tickets left, so I don't know if that's true or not. UCF hasn't said anything about their allotment, obviously. I would think that they would be talking, it up if they had gone through their allotment quickly or whatever. So, I mean, it's a long trip for UCF fans to make.
It is, and I know in talking to Trace that the flights were outrageous, that if you didn't kind of lock it in, it was going to be hard for people to travel from Orlando. I don't know what the LSU Booster Club is like in Phoenix. I'm looking that up. But I do know that when the Saints played the Cardinals a few years ago, we were in a bar. Now, granted, the Saints were out there too, but we were in a bar and the LSU game was on, and the entire bar was LSU fans. So, I think you're going to see a lot of purple and gold there in Glendale, Arizona.
Yeah, so this very well could be a hostile environment for us.
Yeah.
Comparatively, it sounds like they would probably have the majority of fans there, unfortunately. But
yeah, I'm looking here about the Phoenix chapter of the LSU alumni, trying to see what they've got as numbers. But there is a group out there, so they're right off the bat, they've got a certain amount of fans that are going to be there just from the ones that are based in Phoenix. So, again, you get all the ones that travel from here and East Texas. There's, a lot of LSU fans, Houston and East. So, yeah, I think UCF will probably be in the minority fan base-wise for sure.
Right. Well, that may not be a bad thing as well. I mean, sometimes that can fire you up as well. So, all right. Well, what's your prediction on this game? What do you think?
Well, I think if all things are equal, I think LSU probably would win the game, just because they, are the more battle-tested team. And, I think the Bulls are kind of shaking it out a little bit, unfortunately for UCF, that the American maybe was a little down this year. Now, you can't read too much into the bowl games, but, just by strength of competition, and LSU has been there all year, I would tend to lean towards LSU. But if they're not engaged, and I mean 100% engaged, UCF will beat them, because UCF has proven it in the past. They have the offense and certainly can move the ball even as good as LSU's defense is. But I'm going to say LSU slightly, but to me, this game is a toss-up and really could go either way.
All right. Well, they're a 7.5-point favorite,
which I think is high. I think if LSU wins it, it's not going to be by that much. But I think if UCF wins it because LSU is not engaged, I think UCF could win by 7.5.
All right, Paul. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your insight on LSU.
My pleasure from the New Orleans Bureau of UCF Knightline.
Absolutely. We also appreciate all that stuff that you've sent us as far as covering the Saints and all that stuff. That's really big for us, and I really appreciate it.
Anytime, and if Trylko Smith turns up big in the playoffs, I'll send you some of that as well.
All right. Always good to hear from our friend Paul Boron. Make sure you check out the all-new NightlineSports.com for Nightline t-shirts, archive episodes, and more. While you check us out online, let's hear from another one of our great partners before we get to former UCF quarterback Nick Patti's insights. Knightline Extra, the UCF Fiesta version. Back in a flash. This segment is brought to you by Scouted, the app where athletes of all ages get exposed, discovered, and recruited. Download for free on the Apple Store or Google Play and get discovered today. Welcome to Inside the Red Zone with Nick, the Wild Knight Patti. Nick, it seems like it's been forever since we talked. It's only been a couple weeks, but a lot's happened. National Signing Day has happened, and we're on the road to the Fiesta Bowl. First of all, let's talk about National Signing Day. One of the cool things is we've got another quarterback from Milani High in Hawaii, Dylan Gabriel. What do you think about him?
Yeah, it's exciting. First off, thanks for having me back. It's been awesome. Been too long. It's exciting. I think it's a great addition for them. I think there's certain times when, it's like you would get one kid from Hawaii and it's sort of strange for your program in Florida and smaller at UCF to get one kid from Hawaii. It turns out to be a stud. And obviously, we all know what Mackenzie kind of turned into nationally, but, to get another kid from the same high school with very similar skill sets, that is extremely explosive. It's exciting. And these kind of things happen from time to time with programs where sort of create a pipeline. I hope that's what UCF is doing. There's a ton of talent over there that, isn't always of the highest exposure, but it's certainly of the highest caliber. And, I think that, to hone in on Dylan a little bit more specifically, him and Mackenzie's skill sets are very similar. They are guys that like to create. He does a really good job of creating offense and creating yardage, especially when things aren't there. And I think that's kind of today's game, right? It's, when things aren't there, you make something happen, make chicken salad out of, the other word, chicken, the other word. But,
we
he
know
does
what you
a good
mean.
job of that. Yeah. But he also, you break down some film of him and he does a really good job of maintaining fundamentals and being able to work within the pocket, being able to obviously go through some progressions. He's got a really live arm, and to go back a point to my last point about being able to create, but also work within the framework of an offense. I think that's where Mackenzie is so good. He's able to really make some things happen when maybe it's not the best play call. Maybe guys aren't getting open, whatever it may be, blocking breaks down. But he always looks to work within the framework of the offense first. It's one thing that really stood out to me on Dylan's tape, and he's able to make a lot of plays because of his natural ability. He's got a live arm. He's extremely accurate. What I liked about what they do is that, watch some high school offenses and they're very stale and, you throw a lot of deep balls and maybe a lot of screens and stuff like that. They do a lot of intermediate stuff. They work the seams a lot. And I think you really get a feel for where high school offenses are trying to go to with these colleges with RPOs and working tight ends and seams and slot receivers and all that good stuff. And, I think it's exciting for Dylan to be on board. I think he's an extreme talent, and it'll be exciting to see what he turns into.
Well, it's interesting because he's the guy that took over for Mackenzie when Mackenzie left, and
Sure.
it could be, the same situation here, and that's just very odd to have that happen.
Yeah, big time. And it's today's day and age. I'll tell you, we've got some talent at quarterback, obviously with Daryl Mack, and he's done a great job so far. But today's day and age with coaching staffs that come in, not to discredit Daryl at all or anybody else on the roster, but there's just something to be said for you recruiting a guy and bringing him in and playing your guy. We kind of saw that with Coach Frost a little bit, and you see it all around. It is not abnormal for no matter who's on the roster to get your guy and want to play him if he's talented. And so, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know if you've looked at the Hawaii record for high school, but this kid has broken pretty much every record that there is. Second on that list would be Tua.
Yeah, right.
About fourth on that list would be Mackenzie. So
Love it.
This guy is, potentially, yeah. I say, better than Mackenzie. And
for sure,
and
potentially is big. You can never with guys coming out. You see all the time these 5-star guys that end up not panning out to exactly that. And I'm not by any means, portraying or foreshadowing that for him. But at the same time, it's just a matter of time with how guys transition. Just because anyone, how guys transition to the college level and the college speed, and learning an offense, also adjusting to college life, as a kind of an adult, in a different.
And again, another quarterback that's a long ways from home. So
100%.
That's can be tough. Weird, but Mackenzie's here as well with him. So, and
Absolutely.
I know that they're good buddies. So I think that's extremely
it's exciting,
cool.
Man. It's different than getting a kid from the same high school in Georgia. It's just got a different feel. I think it's kind of a cool culture UCF's building with this kind of Hawaii tie, and I just think it's very, very neat, very special.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we got a big game coming up. UCF LSU in the Fiesta Bowl. First of all, I guess the big question is Daryl Mack. He had a great game against Memphis, obviously, but this is really his third start, and it's in one of the biggest games, if not the biggest game of the year. What does he need to do to make this thing happen and get us a win?
There's a couple points you point out there, I think, that are highlighted. This is a different stage than he's been on. I think I made the point last time I was on that he has a little familiarity with this stage, just, playing in the Peach Bowl last year and being involved and, kind of being one play away and preparing like a starter and all that. But, he's the guy this year, and this is a huge stage. They're trying to seriously make a statement. And it's in a different environment. I think last game, the conference championship, I think that's great experience for him. I think that's a great opportunity for him to get his feet wet in a hostile environment, against a good team and really, get comfortable. At the same time, that's a home game against a conference opponent that they've played before. So there's a lot of comforts there. There will not be as many in Arizona. And so I think it's important for him to, this is a strange point to make, but one, it's going to be in his preparation. It's going to be extremely important for him to know everything that they're going to try to do to LSU, to know the game plan inside and out, to not have to think for a second, to be able to communicate to everybody, keep everybody calm, because he's going to have his own emotions. He's going to have his own stuff going on. So he's going to have to be the calming factor to everyone. And it's, kind of look at that maybe as a little unfair. He should be the guy that people try to help him, but it never is as a quarterback. You're always the calming factor. So I think it's really important for him to be extremely accurate early on and make good decisions with the ball in the passing game. I think it'll be wise of Coach Heupel to start with a lot of, quick, high percentage passes just to get him comfortable, to get his accuracy rolling, to get his arm hot a little bit. And, I think it comes down to up front, just like it did against Auburn. We're going to have to run the rock to win this game, and that's going to be a huge factor. So, obviously that's going to help Daryl, but I just think for him to be completely prepared is the most important thing for him, because there's going to be a lot of unknowns. There's going to be things that happen that weren't expected, and he just needs to be comfortable with what they're trying to do so that he can settle into the game and produce.
Do you think that he's going to be thinking a lot about protecting the ball? I know it's kind of a silly question. I mean,
sure.
Of course I would if I had the first quarter that he had in the championship game. But
that's probably what highlights it for him even more. Is the fact that that put us in a little bit of a hole early on. And you see what that does to the team and the demeanor and all that. And so I think that's the only reason that it's a major emphasis for him, is because he made those boo-boos.
Yeah.
Last game, but I think so. But I hope he doesn't do it to the point where it hinders his play. I hope he doesn't do it to the point where he holds the ball in the pocket and maybe takes a couple sacks. Hope he doesn't do it to the point where, he maybe you're trying to overthink it on maybe some exchanges and drop the ball there. There's a point where that can hinder your play. Hopefully he's got the poise and savvy enough to do that. And hopefully they've built his confidence in that regard. But that remains to be seen. We'll
come back to talking about our guys in just a couple of minutes, but I want to get your thoughts on LSU.
Just as an overview, I think LSU is a great opponent for UCF. I think the first thing that pops into my mind is that there's no better measuring stick. I mean, if you want to be measured against these elite programs, you don't have to go far from LSU to be that elite program, especially up front. And so I think that they're a perfect matchup for us. I think that it's going to be a test up front. LSU perennially has an extremely big and physical and very athletic defensive line. And so I think if our offensive line has ever been tested, it will be this week. And then, DBU, right? I mean, these are guys that every year they've got one or two first-round picks in the defensive secondary. This year's no different. I think that they, if I'm following the news correctly, have had a few guys step away from the game to enter the draft. But they got a lot of talent back there. You got a lot of talent as their safeties. Their safeties, I think, are the strong point of their defense, as it is ours. And so that allows them a lot of freedoms. I think you're going to see a different style. And I'm talking defense right now because it's in my nature. But I think you'll see a different style of defense from them this week. Or this game, I guess, against UCF than you do in their week in and week out, because it's I think – in their mind, it's a different style of play that they're getting from on the offensive side. I think in the SEC week in and week out, you'll see a lot more bigger fronts. You'll see less blitzes. You'll see against UCF, I expect to see a lot of man coverage, a lot of man blitzes and stunts up front and stuff of that nature. I think they'll use their linebackers in a lot more athletic ways, maybe some stand-up defensive ends, stuff along that nature, to where they think they can get creative against UCF, because UCF will give them a lot more creative looks, in my opinion, than what they see weekly against SEC opponents that are very run-heavy, which we are too. We're run-heavy, but in a much different fashion. So, I expect to see a lot of man blitzes, man coverage, and crazy looks up fronts with some stunts and games and all that good stuff. On offense, I think they're straightforward. They don't stray from what they do. They are going to pound you and run the rock until you're blue in the face, and they're going to try to hit you with play action and hit a lot of out-breaking routes and a lot of comebacks. And, they're not the razzle-dazzle passing game that you'll see around the country, but they will lull you to sleep in the run game, and they do a really good job of it. I say lull you to sleep, but they're effective, and they lean a lot on play action. So I think it's a great test for UCF.
Do you think that this LSU team is better than the Auburn team that we faced last year in the Peach Bowl?
Yes. Yes and no. That's a good question. I think that they're in a different place as a program than they were against the Auburn team we played last year. I think Auburn haven't had that end of the season that they did last year. It sort of felt like they should have been maybe in a different place, having beaten the two teams that were in the playoff. And then, you go to the Peach Bowl, and it's a huge bowl. It's a great game. However, you're kind of coming off a high. I think LSU as a program had a phenomenal year. They had some higher hopes, but they had a really strong season. They're flying high. And I think that they're playing better right now than, they're playing better at the end of the season than they did in the middle of the season. So they're kind of on an upswing. And so I don't know that they're better. I think it's a much different style, much different team. But in my opinion, I don't know who I'd rather play, but I think this LSU team is more of a complete team than the Auburn team last year.
Well, one of the things about LSU, we're the higher-ranked team. We're number 8, they're number 11, they're 9-3, we're 12-0. Obviously, the SEC is a little bit different than the AAC, but their losses came from Florida, Alabama, and Texas A&M. Texas A&M game was that 74-72 game.
Highest scoring game in the history of college football.
Yeah. That was an absolute crazy
Which is
thing.
uncharacteristic because of the amount of overtimes and all that.
Yeah. They don't score that many points most of the time.
Right.
I'm looking here at their schedule, and the highest amount of points that they scored normally in the regular season was 45 against Ole Miss. And
Chattanooga.
Right, yeah. They did not score at all against Alabama, which obviously Alabama has pretty good defense, I would think.
Right, yeah. I think you're safe in saying that.
Yeah.
You put up, and you're looking at it, you put up, the biggest star to me is you put up 36 against Georgia. 36 against Georgia is pretty solid against a really good Georgia team. And, you beat Georgia. That's the one kind of star to their schedule this year that I think, is their shining moment. And that's kind of the point in the season where after a Florida loss and then LSU wins, that they were kind of in the hunt for the SEC and all that. And, otherwise you look at their schedule and again, like you said, to your point, the SEC is no slouch. Other than a couple games on here, that's to go week in and week out to play Ole Miss, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State, Alabama, and Arkansas in one stretch that's a hell of a stretch.
Now they did have a couple cupcakes on their
for sure, absolutely
on their schedule, and I don't even know Southeast Louisiana, I believe.
Louisiana,
they
Rice.
had Rice, and then they had
awful.
Louisiana Tech. So
for sure. Yeah, no, it's not the most impressive. Even against the Mississippi State team that was above average but subpar in the SEC. You got a 19-3 game there. You look at Louisiana Tech, it's 38-21, which I'm sure that game, I didn't watch it, but I'm sure it was probably more in hand for LSU, but 38-21 by no means is how LSU should stand against Louisiana Tech, in my opinion.
Right.
An Auburn team that was, mediocre to subpar, 22-21, which is a rivalry game, always a huge game, but look there. That's another game that I think LSU is very gettable. I think they showed that this year. I think they're vulnerable in a couple places on offense to where they don't have. I could shoot myself in the foot by saying this, but I don't think they have that much explosive playability. I think they have great athletes. I think they're able to gash one in the run game and maybe create some explosion there from time to time. But in the pass game, I don't think that they have the creativity and that boom offense. And so that is an Achilles heel of theirs. I think their linebackers are, they've got a couple guys that are, high first round pick caliber talents, but some of their linebackers are gettable as far as athleticism goes and speed, which I think we can take advantage of. And then I think if we can create holes up front, that we'll be able to gash them a little bit because they've got tremendous speed and athleticism and talent. But I do think that our speed is something that we can use against a team like LSU, who on defense speed is not their thing. They have great coverage ability. They've got great athletes and they've got some freaks at linebacker and a lot of size. But I don't think, speed and being gashed is something that they really match up well against. I think that's something we can expose them by doing.
Yeah, they're a 7.5 point favorite, which is not a lot, obviously. We've been in bowl games, I think, that we've been a lot worse odds than that. So,
sure. Yeah,
I think that the odds makers obviously realize that UCF is for real.
Sure.
A couple of years ago, this obviously would have been a lot different. The one thing I'm worried about is our defense.
Yeah.
Obviously, they can't come and play in the second half against LSU. They can't, whiff on the first half. It has to be, the whole game. They have to play a complete game.
Yeah, and that's, what LSU is good at is controlling the ball. I think that, one of the things they hang their hat on is being able to run the rock, being able to slow it down a little bit. They're not like your typical team that doesn't care about time of possession. They do. I mean, they hang their hat on that. And so, if we don't show up to play and we get behind a few scores and they can hold on to the rock and do what they want to do on offense and be a little bit slower, it could get really interesting, which is somewhat what you saw in the conference championship. And so, that kind of thing against LSU, I don't know that we'll feel as comfortable being able to come back from as easily. Not to say that was easy. It was a dogfight, but I think sort of elaborating on your point a little bit, if they don't show up in the first half, it's going to be a different story because it's a much different team.
Who needs to step up on that defensive side of the ball? What needs to be done for this whole thing to work against LSU?
Well, it's not really one guy because, in my opinion, our defensive line has been handled at most times this year. I think that up front, I don't know if it's because the linebackers aren't filling gaps and that the scheme is a little more complicated than it should be, which there's been some rumblings that they've had a lot of things in on the defensive side of the ball and that there's been some confusion between the linebackers and the defensive line and gap assignments, etc. And so I don't know what it is or whose fault it is. I just know that at times, in my opinion, and watching the defensive line, they've looked kind of handled. There's been a lot. There hadn't been a whole lot of guys fighting through blocks or breaking tackles and two-gapping, if you will. I think Tristan Hill has been great at times this year, but for the most part, he's been very quiet. And he'll show up from time to time. Maybe he's battling an injury. I don't know. He's the guy, I think, if you're going to pick one guy that can show up and dominate, kind of like, Shaquem. We saw Shaquem all year last year dominate, but he showed up against Auburn and there you go. Shaquem's a superstar. Tristan Hill can be the guy that dominates up front and shows up, and he's a superstar. Our linebackers, I think, is huge, but our defensive ends too. I mean, Titus, I think it's a huge game for him. I think that it's a game that on the edge that he can create some chaos in the pass game with some of this play action and dip his shoulder and be able to pass rusher when he needs to be. But I also think setting the edge against these guys, and he's going to have to take on some big old tight ends that are going against him. And so I think it's a huge game up front for those guys. I've said that so much this year. I sound like a broken record, but our DBs, I think too, creating some turnovers. I think winning the turnover margin probably wins us this game if we can figure out a way to do that.
Well, I think that speed also is we've got speed on both sides of the ball, and I don't know that they have that kind of speed. I don't think a lot of teams have that kind of speed.
I agree. And team speed, like you said, I mean, it's not just offense, but team speed, special teams, all that good stuff.
Right. I think that they're going to be surprised.
I do too, and I think this is a game that, you create maybe one or two turnovers on the defensive side. The thing that can change this game around for UCF and just not to say that not to speak like we're huge underdogs and that we need a miracle, but if you come out and create some turnovers on defense and you maybe block a punt or you maybe get a punt return that you return to the 10 or score on special teams, whatever it may be, something like that, whoever that happens for are huge in these games because it's a momentum builder. You get the whole stadium's going nuts, all that good stuff really sets the tone. So I will certainly be on edge to see if UCF makes that happen.
Key to the game on offense. What do we have to do?
Yeah, I don't want to say protect Darryl Mack in the passing game, but I think get him involved in the passing game early on, get him comfortable. We have got to be able to be a multifaceted offense more so than we've been all year. I think, we've been spectacular running the ball, but I think more so than ever, we've got to be extremely effective in the passing game this week. I think our OPOs and our play action, I'd love to see them press the ball down the field a couple times early and loosen those guys up. In my opinion, our intermediate passing game is going to be huge, taking advantage of our tight ends and their athleticism, against their linebackers, and using our matchups with speed, with maybe, our running backs against some of their linebackers. I think those are great speed matchups. And so that'll be the stuff I think in the passing game early on the offensive side is one, getting Darryl involved very early, getting him comfortable, and then really attacking the intermediate routes and the matchups inside that I think we can win on.
Keys to the game on defense. What do they need to do to get this done?
I think defensive side, pretty simple. I think you set a tone up front. I think our linebackers and defensive line have to be on extremely on the same page this week. I think gap responsibility is huge because they do have a power run game and they will come right down at you. It's not your typical zone read, zone run game where it's a little more guessy and you sort of have to read your keys and all that. It's downhill right at you. So if we're not on the same page as far as our defensive line and linebackers go, that's when you get gashed against a team like LSU and their downhill run game. And so Pat Jasinski, huge game for him to step up, solidify himself in the middle, and Tristan Hill as well. I think Tristan Hill is kind of a focal point up front for us, along with Titus. I think those two guys this week could win us this ball game with making LSU kind of get out of their comfort zone. I think first and foremost, we got to stop the run, make LSU do things that they're not extremely comfortable, even though they've got some talent and their quarterback's he's a gunslinger, he's very, very talented. But if we can make them get out of their character, what they're used to, what they're comfortable with, and throw the ball a little bit more than maybe they want to, that's huge on defense.
All right. Any kind of a prediction what you think's going to happen?
Oh, man.
I know. I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah, putting you on the spot.
I like I said earlier, I really do like the way we match up against LSU. But with that being said, I like the way I'm excited we're matched up against LSU because I really do think it's a true measuring stick to where we're at as a program and how we're able to hang. I mean, I think, obviously in our minds last year, we didn't surprise ourselves by beating Auburn, but we surprised a lot of people. We're no longer lying in the weeds. I think we've taken the element of surprise out of it for people with some of the claims we've made, and so this year, I think this is a true measuring stick, and so I'm excited to see. I'm not saying that I'm not as confident this year because I am. I think that we've got extreme talent to be able to hang with LSU, and I like the way we match up. I am confident that we hang and we win the game. I really am. I don't think it's more than a 10-point game. With that being said, I think it could be a 17-point game. I think we have the ability to win by 10 to 17 points. But with just in thinking of how LSU plays and what their MO is and holding on to the ball and run the rock and all that, I could see this being a 6 or 7 point game.
Okay. Well, I think so as well. I think we're going to get it done. So
yeah, no doubt.
Well, Nick, thank you very much. All we have is this game coming up to see what happens, and what happens, and then we'll talk about it when it's over. I appreciate all year long, all season long, you sticking with us and talking with us and all that. So I really appreciate it.
Been a fun year, man. I mean, it's I can't only how much fun they're having as a team. It makes it fun for what we do, man. I appreciate you having me on. You guys do an awesome job. Can't wait to see start our year with a W. We'll see what happens.
Hey, Night Nation. It's Adam from the Sons of UCF. Be sure to check out our show every Wednesday only on the Knightline Sports Network. Now, back to two guys who probably won't be Cow of the Week nominees, Andrew and Trace.
Hey, I got a question for you. Have you liked Knightline on Facebook and followed us on Twitter at UCF Knightline? Come on, what are you waiting for? We're talking with UCF's #1 fan from Louisiana when this UCFiesta edition of Knightline Extra returns after this word from another of our valued sponsors.
Spice up your company with homemade marketing services from Tasty Gravy Creative. Tasty Gravy serves up a menu of budget-friendly marketing, graphic design, and public relations services customized to your specific goals. Co-owned by a UCF graduate, Tasty Gravy can help refresh your brand, strengthen your online presence, or reinforce your company's message. Contact Tasty Gravy for help with your website, social media, marketing, advertising materials, and more. Visit tastygravy.com.
All right, welcoming back TJ LSU Dad, one of my absolute favorites. I say this every time I talk to him. One of my favorite people that I've ever had on this show. This guy has a very unique perspective because he loves UCF, but his true love, I believe, is LSU. So you have a perspective that most other people do not have, TJ. So you can tell us a lot about LSU. Last time we talked about just, the matchup and stuff, but this time I want you to really fill Knight Nation in on what's going to happen and who our Knights are up against on New Year's Day.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, as always, man, for having me on, man. I'm absolutely honored, and I look forward to it every time.
Awesome. So what can you tell us about this LSU team that we don't know? Start off with just an overall synopsis of their season so far.
And that's a great question, man. I'm glad you started there because we got off to a great start. And no one predicted our team to win. We're expecting to be at 10 wins, but no one gave us 9, You had, these writers over at CBS Sports who I get into it with frequently, saying, Coach O he might win 5 games and get fired at the end of the year, And so you had all of these, different media sites saying we're going to do this and do that. And this team far exceeded what a lot of people expected. I felt we were going to be pretty good, So the Miami game wasn't a surprise. Of course, we broke Miami because they haven't been the same, since that first game. But, Miami, we had some big key wins. We had the Georgia win, Auburn win, which we won on a kick. So they fight the entire game. The game that hurt me the most, of course, was dropping that game to Alabama. And, the way we lost to Alabama. And I was in the Superdome, going back to the BCS championship game when it was Alabama versus LSU in the Louisiana Superdome, man. And they shut us out of that one 21-0. And then we come back. This wasn't a BCS game, but we couldn't get a point on the board. So that was extremely frustrating because we still had a shot. If we could have got over that Alabama game, we were still in the hunt. But we lose that, we take care of Arkansas, but then we run into Texas A&M, a school that we haven't lost to. We had a perfect winning streak going with Texas A&M, and we dropped that game. And so we've lost some hard games because that's the big, massive overtime game. But I think if you want to see the true character of LSU football, you look at the Texas A&M game. Even with the officiating, the atrocious officiating crews, the team is going to fight. And that's one thing that I love about them. And none of the games that we played, they just lay down and quit. They fought, every game, every time they took the field, and Texas A&M was the game right before this one. So you guys are getting us coming off of Texas A&M loss, that big 7 overtime, disaster. And we really need 10 wins. So if that can sum up our season, this is not an Auburn situation like you guys had last year where Auburn was talking about, we just didn't feel like playing. No, we need 10 wins. And that's this game right here against UCF.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So you're telling me that LSU is going to bring it completely, and they're going to play this entire game. They're not going to make any excuses when it's over, no matter what happens, that they weren't into it.
The team has taken on the likeliness of the coach. Coach O is this hard-nosed, tough, he's the perfect fit for LSU. And it's his team. He now has the support of the athletic department. Things still wasn't, we were still divided up the middle as far as the fan base. You still had the Les Miles disciples trying to see if this guy was going to come back. He was still living in Baton Rouge. So it's now finally it's his team. You know, he has the contract extension. And so, you know, this is a big game. Everybody's going to be watching this game. That's why they paired us two together. Because, number one, they want UCF to shut up, okay? And number two, you know, LSU is, you know, pretty much carrying the other side of the SEC with the exception of Alabama. You know, there's nobody. It's Alabama, LSU, you know, Texas A&M, which they beat us. But this game is key. You know, if you want to claim that the SEC is a big dominant conference, they got to beat this UCF team. You want to claim that, you know, Coach O is the coach for LSU going forward. We got to win this game, you know, and yeah, we have some players going to the league, but we still, you know, for recruiting, the brand, everything, we got to win this game.
So talk to me a little bit about, like, the strengths of LSU and maybe later on a little weaknesses of LSU.
You know, of course, I would start with our linebacker play, you know. And, you know, Michael Divinity and Devin, you know, we have a Dick Buckus winner at linebacker. And he's deserving of it, you know. I'm the football prophet. I said that kid was going to be a Dick Buckus winner before he was even a starter for LSU. You know, some people were like, TJ, you crazy, man. There's no way. You know, he's a converted running back. And I said, this guy, Devin White, is everything, you know. And so right now we have a big-time legendary linebacker for us, you know, and won a trophy we haven't, you know, which is a cherished trophy for our defense. So I will start there, and Michael Divinity right next to him. These two guys, you know, have been exceptional all year, you know. And, of course, our secondary play. Now, this is one of the areas, we'll get to that a little bit later, but, you know, we have a secondary coach that is, I think he's the best in the business, with Coach Corey Raymond. You know, I don't think there's anyone in NFL or college that has, you know, that can say they've placed that many people in the NFL, especially in the first round. You know, he is an unbelievable coach. And so we've had a lot of time to get ready for this game. And so our secondary is going to be there. And, you know, Joe Burrow has really been a savior for us, man. You know, you know, when at the beginning of the season, we had two quarterbacks to transfer when we pulled this guy in from Ohio, you know. And I wasn't really, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't, you know, immediately saying, all right, we made the right choice. I just said, I'm going to trust my coaching staff. And, you know, Joe Burrow was a great pickup for us because the kid came in August and, you know, we began to move the ball. You know, I wanted to see a little bit more, but we have him for another year. And he's another guy in which our quarterback, this is his team. Of course we wasn't putting up the numbers UCF was putting up. Of course we wasn't. You guys had a quarterback in a hunt for the Heisman, right? But LSU has always been 5 yards in a cloud of dust, you know. And for the first time, we began to move away from that. We had to. You know, Tua at Alabama pretty much forced the league to change. You know, you need a pocket passer who can pitch the ball. And so I would count him as a strength. And we have some really good guys on the offensive line. You know, one that I love a lot is number 77, Sadiq Charles. You know, he's a guy who's been starting, you know, since his freshman year. We threw him in the fire. And, you know, he's the one that I'm looking forward to next year. I have him down as going to be the number one offensive lineman in the SEC. So those are my strengths for LSU.
Yeah, the things that I hear about the most, obviously, are the offense and defensive line. And, I mean, that's where you win and lose football games. So our guys are going to have to do as much as they possibly can to deal with those guys. Now, we're probably a little bit smaller than your guys. So, you know, that may be an area that we struggle in. Talk about those guys a little bit, those offensive and defensive linemen.
Rashad Lawrence was a guy who was being recruited heavy by Ohio State. Matter of fact, I called the police on Urban Meyer to keep him from getting him, I literally called the state police and said, hey, you got to stop this guy from coming to this high school, But he was, we have, a defensive lineman like Rashad Lawrence that, he's been solid for us, man. We were able to contain that Alabama running game. They wasn't able to run. There wasn't anything in the middle to run, Yeah, sometimes they beat us to the outside, but when we deal with offensive linemen, we have this, this Hawaii pipeline that's working for us the same way it's working out for you, We did have a guy declare for the draft. That hurt us, Alexander, he's going to the NFL. But for the most part, man, our defensive line is solid, and our offensive line holds, I would say one of their weaker games was the Alabama game. Right, but if you go look at the Texas A&M game, those guys played through 7 overtimes, and so they are battle tested. That is some of the core. We're a young team. We're a very young team because last year Coach O played a lot of his freshmen and sophomores, and so now we're benefiting from, starting all of those freshmen last year. All of those guys are here this year, and our offensive line is going to they're going to create some holes. We have Clyde Edward, Hilaire, the young man that was involved in the shooting. Brissett. Those are our backs. Need to get a lot of production out of them, but definitely the running lanes. I feel confident that they could open it up late in the game because of the size advantage.
One of the other things that I hear every time somebody talks about LSU and they compare them with UCF is these tall wide receivers that you have.
Yeah.
Talk about them a little bit and what their production is like.
Before I go there, man, one of the things that scares the crap out of me about UCF is the wide receiver play, and I've been telling people, a lot of the LSU fans that, especially the ones that are really confident, say, hey, man, the speed at their wide receiver is unbelievable. The speed at a wide receiver, they have running backs that can pop out the backfield and convert instantly into a wide receiver, running a 4.2 and a 40, so it's a team that's full of lightning fast wide receivers. Our wide receiver play hasn't been there, the whole year. We have Jefferson, who he's been pretty reliable for us, right? We had a kid that we lost at the beginning of the year, Drake Davis. He was suspended off the team for domestic. This was a big 6'6" guy. We have another 6'5" guy, on the opposite ends. But Jefferson, he has been the one that has bailed us out, a lot. We haven't gone to the tight end as much as I thought we would have, right? But on those slants, slant routes, deep sevens, we've relied on Jefferson to pull that off for us, But head to head, I would give UCF an advantage in the wide receiver category, regardless of the height. Don't make no difference how tall they are if you can't catch him. He could be 5'1". If you can't catch him, it doesn't matter. And so height is just an overrated, attribute when you're dealing with wide receiver. I mean, look at Wes Walker. New England Patriots won a Super Bowl and they didn't have one receiver that was over 6 feet tall. So UCF poses a threat with these really, really fast receivers. I don't think the major challenge to your defense is going to come from our receivers, to be honest with you. I think it's going to come from our running game.
Yeah, and that's been a spot, obviously, that we've struggled with a little bit. I hope that we get started fast, though, because I don't think that this is a team that you would want to start slow against on defense and let them get ahead of you.
Right. Yeah, Dave Aranda, man, he's one of the, we gave him a raise because we think You know, he's the best defensive coordinator in the country. And his nickel packages, man, I can't wait to see how UCF adjusts to our blitz packages, you know. And UCF is one of these teams that I don't care if they're down 28 points. You know, the game is not over. It's never over, you know. And that's another area where I'm sort of a little bit nervous because we will not have Greedy Williams. You know, that's the experience we have, you know, on that left side. But, you know, we do have you know, it's LSU. We recruit heavy, you know. We have a lot of guys that it's the next man up. But, you know, I'm really excited to watch your offense, which is, you know, one of the best in college football. Let's just give it to you. Going up against what I feel is the best defensive coordinator in college football. That game between us two, matchup-wise, strategy-wise, I think is going to be better than anything that's in the playoffs because UCF should have been in the playoffs.
Well, I won't argue with that, of course, but and that's neither here nor there now. I mean, you know, whatever. Of course we should have been, but we're not, and we're playing LSU, so I'm good with it.
I hate we playing you, man. I hate it, man. Of all the people to play. Of all the people to play, man. You know, this was personal, bro. They did this to get at me.
just you, yeah.
Yo, this don't have anything to do with you guys, man. This is me tweeting at that committee all year, man. And, you know, it's just, God, I hate it that I got to play you. My goodness.
So, I mean, you know both of these teams really well, so you could be the insider for either one of these teams. I mean,
man,
you've watched all the games of both of them.
Everything. There is, long before I knew you guys were going to play LSU, man, I was studying your running backs. You know what I'm saying? I was like, you know, why haven't we gotten Killings out in space a little bit more? You know, I just, you know, in between the tackles, I don't think that's his strength right now. And it looked like last year we were able to get him out in space, and the guy just took. I've watched every game, every single game, and everything I could get my hands on with this team, and I'm serious, man. You know, your coaching staff has done a great job. It doesn't, but this never works this way. You don't lose a coach and then another coach come in, and it's like as if nothing ever happened.
Right.
It always falls apart. It always collapses. I mean, look at Temple. You know, they lose their coach to Baylor, right? And the next year, it looks like a completely different team.
Right.
Completely, they were a running powerhouse, and they went from a running powerhouse to this trickeration, read option crap, and it just went downhill, man. You know, but when you go the year before, you had one of the best fullbacks, and you know, out there killing people. You know, and that's what I'm saying. You guys had a coaching staff come in and didn't pull a tempo on you. They kept everything as it was, and you know, they build on certain areas, but you know, I'm blown away by this team as someone who is a fan and supporter of UCF football.
Right.
It's just been wonderful to watch. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think, I mean, you're familiar with the speed. It's not just offensive speed. It's not just running back speed. It's not just wide receiver speed. It's team speed that UCF has. I mean, the entire team is built for speed.
Yeah.
They're not the biggest guys, but there's really, really, really fast, speedy guys. Do you think
they get there fast?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Do you think that LSU might have a little bit of a problem containing that?
I think the problem is going to come in, you know, before I say that, you guys got a pretty good number 42, right? That kid is a true freshman, if I'm not mistaken, that middle linebacker. You have, you know.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So,
yeah.
I can't get his name right off top, but you know what I'm talking about? Number 40, that linebacker, man, he is pretty special. I've been following him all year, you know. Our strength is our secondary, and that's what's going to get tested against UCF. You know, we pride ourselves in being DBU. It's a part of who we are, you know. We will fight you in the street if you say you're DBU is something we're very, very passionate about. And UCF is a wide receiver university, you know. And this year, you have number 30, that running back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
1,000 yards.
You know what I'm saying?
In about 6 games.
Unbelievable, brother.
Yeah.
You know.
Walk
You
on.
have this guy here with this unbelievable jet fuel acceleration, you know. That element right there, because last year you guys just pitched the ball all over the place. You know, this year you added, you know, this running game was more involved. You know, so you know, we have to get on top of you. We gotta break your will. You know, it's like I told
I don't
somebody.
think that's gonna.
You're gonna have to break their will, because if you don't break their will, they're gonna keep coming back like the Halloween and Jason. They're just gonna keep on coming back over and over. Every time you kill them, they come back. You know?
And then that's the thing that is extremely hard to do with this team.
It's
That's
hard.
the thing that people don't understand about UCF. Is that it's really hard. I've never seen any team break our will. And that's why I think that we've won 25 games in a row, is because nobody, even Memphis, with this AAC championship game, coming out and we're down by 17, our quarterback that is starting is real, you know, he started one other game, but he's starting the American championship game, the conference championship game, his second true start. And he fumbles the ball 3 times, but he forgets about it, steps back up and throws the ball and runs the ball and winds up, you know, being responsible for 6 touchdowns.
It's amazing.
This is the best part about this team, is because you cannot break their will. So I'm not going to listen to that part.
I know, and that's what has to happen. You know what I'm saying? You gotta break their will, man, because, you know, all jokes aside, I consider that one of, you know, that's when I think of, you know, UCF football team. You know, their desire, their will to win that game has been greater than other teams' will to beat them. You know, they just constantly, you know, overcome. And, you know, what you guys may not realize is, you know, people, when things are going bad in a UCF game, fans around the country heckle me. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
They don't come to you. You know
they heckle us too. Don't worry.
Hey, TJ, your UCF team ain't doing good. Hey, TJ, Memphis done jumped on them, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, I'm not even concerned.
Yeah.
I'm not even concerned. I don't care what the score is. I'm not concerned because, you know, like I said, they realize, I think every one of these players, they realize that they have a chance to do something that many teams, there haven't been many teams like UCF, you know, in college football, and they have a chance to do something really, really special, really, really amazing. And that's why I wasn't in favor of them just giving Florida whatever they wanted for that little crappy little offer they made.
Yeah.
You know, it's time to establish value on this program.
You don't have to worry about that. Our guy,
we feel we're just as good.
Yeah, our guy that's in charge isn't going to do that. He isn't just gonna take the money and run. That's not his style. I love that about him, and I've said it a million times. None of this, I don't think, would have happened if it wasn't for him. And providing for the players what he provides for them, and you know, providing the staff that he provides for the players. But I pin this completely on the players as well. I mean, this team. These guys love each other. They truly, like, they're brothers. They're all brothers. So it's something special. And I will credit Scott Frost for bringing that mindset, but I will credit Josh Heupel for keeping that mindset going.
Absolutely.
For keeping the family together and not letting anyone lose sight of that. And I also love what he does, this whole, we want to go 1-0 this week, 1-0. That's all we're concerned about, 1-0. I love it. So if this is going to come down to whatever team breaks the other one's will, See, that's what we've been doing all year long, is we've been breaking the will. That's what you guys have been doing. So it's going to be interesting. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I don't see UCF at any point laying down. So if this game has to go into 12 overtimes, I don't know. I mean, it could. You never know. You never know.
And we're coming, LSU is LSU is a big physical football team, and that's something else that, I want to see how UCF adjusts to it, because, LSU has won several games this year just by physically overpowering a lot of teams. Auburn jumps up on top, and LSU, wears them down as the game went on, and so we're rested. That's the other part of it, man. LSU had in terms of strength of schedule, we had the number one strength of schedule in all of college football, which isn't anything to be happy about. I don't know who set that up like that, but I'm ready to go to Alabama route. Line up a bunch of these Mercers and, stuff like that. I never want to see a season like the one we had, because every week, man, it was just one big monster team after the next. And so,
well, you had a couple that were cupcakes. You had Rice.
There's nobody in college football who had to play Georgia and Alabama.
Well, no, that's true. I'll give you that.
There's nobody who had to play a run like that.
I'll give you that. But you also played Arkansas. You played. You played Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech, Rice.
Hey, Louisiana Tech will sucker punch you, man. You can't sleep on those guys.
And then who was the other one? You played another one.
You can't sleep on those, man.
Who was the other one? There was another one. There was another.
Yeah, but you gotta count the big ones. You gotta count the big ones.
There was another cupcake Georgia, in there, though.
Yeah, beating Georgia the way we beat Georgia, that gave us a lot of confidence. If LSU would have gotten over this Alabama game, everything would look different right now.
What happened with Florida? What happened with Florida? How did Florida beat you guys?
Dan, Mullen he does some things really, really well. He does. And we've just played that team too many times, man. And in SEC, we have a lot of corruption in the SEC. There's certain things like we've played Florida, a million times. We played Georgia. Alabama hasn't had to play. Have you noticed Alabama hasn't had to play Florida or Georgia, in
That's
a while?
True. Yeah.
And we're playing Florida. Florida is not on our side, of the conference, but we're playing Florida every year. It was almost like every year, But Dan Mullen is, people don't give this guy enough credit, and this Florida team is going to improve. They're going to come back, but strategy-wise, he beat us. I can't take anything from him. But I'm just tired of facing that one particular team every rip.
Yeah.
And we dropped that game. We shouldn't have dropped that game, and that's one that really got away from us.
Right. The other point that I want to make is that UCF, this is the first time they've been an underdog all year. And I think that they embrace the underdog, especially in bowl games. They've just seemed to really turn it up and embrace that underdog thing. I think that gives us a little bit of a chip on our shoulder. Because UCF needs this. They don't just want this, but they need it. And you're saying that LSU needs it too, and I understand that. But UCF needs it, I think, more than LSU needs it.
I agree.
Just to shut the pundits up. The talking heads, whatever you want to call them. There's so many people that just, dog what we're trying to do, and they don't watch. And then when they do watch, just like Herb Street dogged us left and right. And then all of a sudden, they brought their show here. They did it. and they had to watch and call a game. And then he, all of a sudden, the next week, he figured it out. And he's like, you know what? He even said it at one point. I have to apologize. I didn't know. And now I know. I've my eyes have been opened. So I expect UCF to embrace that and for that to give them a lot of power. So I don't know. I mean,
this is a squad that should have been in the national championship game, and I'm going to say it, for the next 40 years that they should have been in this game. And UCF has a lot riding on this game. LSU, hey man, we've dropped bowl games before, and still came back at the beginning of the season and was still ranked fairly decent in a preseason poll, right? UCF loses this game, they're going to bury you, because they don't like you. And that's one of the things that's my biggest criticism of college football, that if they don't respect your coach, you don't rank well, and that's why you and I are, we're facing each other, right? Because if the coach at UCF football was Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, these big name brand guys, you guys would be in the big dance with the same team and the same schedule.
Right.
Because how are you going to say that, okay, they're not playing anybody, but when I bring up Clemson, they say, well, it's not Clemson's fault that the ACC had a off year. It's the same caliber of football teams. Look at Notre Dame.
Right.
I mean, they're just roller skating, just bounce, roll, skate all the way into the playoffs.
And we beat Pittsburgh way harder than they did.
Come on, man.
We have a team that we common opponent there, and we destroyed Pittsburgh, and they struggled with them. So
right, and everybody's cheering for LSU to silence you, because you're creating a nightmarish scenario for college football. You're exposing how rigged it is.
Yep.
And you guys are doing it more than anybody else. What was it, Fresno State a couple of years ago? About 10 years ago?
Yeah.
You guys are exposing it far more than the Boise State. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But you are doing it far more than Boise State.
I'm glad that LSU is going to bring it. I'm glad that LSU is going to play with their heart and their souls in this game and not make excuses.
We're coming for your curtains. We want to steal your carpet. We want to steal the shelves of your refrigerator. We want your toothbrush holders. We're coming to bed.
Well, that's good. I mean,
You understand? We need this game. So don't get it twisted, brother. We want your carpet off your floor, okay?
Well, that's
but
good.
I love UCF.
Well, I think it's going to be a great game. I'm really, really looking forward to it. Maybe I'll text you or something in the middle of this thing, and
absolutely,
and we'll see what's going on. So, on offense for LSU, what is the key that they need to do to beat UCF?
We have to control. We have to control the line of scrimmage, of course, but we have to give the ball to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? We have to give him the ball. He has to get the ball. This is, he had this little incident. This is a young man who was robbed, last week, right? And, he's a great kid, But in my opinion, and I'm not taking anything from, Brissett, I feel he is the future of, we just had a big-time recruit, but this young man has proven that we have to get him the ball. I think Joe Burrow is going to have a good game, because I don't think UCF is going to be able to pressure him. And when you don't pressure him and you let him stand back there, he can pick you to pieces. You give him the time, he will get you. And I think we will have the time. And with that time, we also have to wear UCF down with our offensive linemen. We have to get to the second level and hit those guys as often as possible, and to begin to wear their linebackers down And over time, I feel that'll make the difference for us late in the third, going into the fourth quarter.
Okay, well, what about on defense? What's the key to the game for LSU on the defensive side of the ball?
Right. I feel here's what cannot happen. Okay, I don't want to see quarterback motion, Adrian Killins out to the wide receiver slot. I don't want to see that.
I know what you're saying.
I want UCF to continue to run him as they have. Just in between the tackles, just 2-4 hole, hit the hole. I want to see those dive plays. What I don't want to see is them pop him out, right? And are these wheel routes that he's on? Because that, I feel that he will make a difference in this game. Because I don't think that you guys, your offensive line is really, really good. And they're really, really good. And so your running game, I think, you may be hindered a little bit. We won't be able to stop. You're going to get those big plays. You can't stop UCF big plays. You're going to get them. But I think we're going to be able to contain that. The mismatches comes with when they begin to pop some of these running backs out into the slot. Then the whole dynamic of that offense will change. So as long as they don't do that, because that is where I have identified a mismatch, and I know the coaches probably don't listen to your show, and I know you're not going to call them, and so I ain't got to worry about saying this.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
But that is where I have identified that we could run into a problem.
You guys have a few missing players. You've mentioned that a little bit, but there's a couple of guys that aren't playing because they're going to the NFL. They don't want to hurt themselves.
Yeah,
I don't understand. I mean, I understand it, but then again, I don't understand it because yes, it's technically a meaningless game. It's a bowl game, but then again, you can really get out there and do an amazing job in a bowl game, and it bumps your draft status up. But if you get hurt, whatever, it's a completely different thing. I understand it both ways, but talk about the guys that aren't playing.
That is what's really that's frustrating, man, because we also Greedy's gone. Okay, we were already thin in the secondary. All right, then we lose two more. We lost two more to drug tests. And violation of team policy. I don't want to say drug test because I don't know what exactly, led to that, right? But violation of team policy, definitely, that hurt us. That hurt us in a major, major way. But we were already thin, when you lose Grady, now you're inserting a guy who hasn't, these guys have a feel for each other, man. And I know we have enough time to have them ready. I know we do, right? But we're also losing the defensive lineman. You mentioned the D-line earlier. But we're losing a D-lineman who has decided to declare he's gone. So our big 99, Alexander, he's gone. He won't be there. So Devin White is going to be there. But yes, there is this debate going back and forth. It happens every year where you have guys who say, you know what, I'm going to the draft, I'm going, and for me, I'm with the guys who go to the draft because I don't like these bowl games unless you're playing for something. This is a lot of unnecessary wear and tear on these student athletes. They didn't get a, holiday season, they were practicing. And I think college football forgets sometimes that these are students, and they just never get a break. This is why I think we have so many injuries, these ACL injuries, all these things that we're racking up. These kids don't ever get a break. And if you're going to have us in these bowl games, then put it in a bracket, and this bracket works towards the playoff. So, I'm with you. Well, I disagree with you there because I didn't want to play this game. But, I'm like, Fiesta then is way over here. And, we got the Sugar Bowl right here, bro. The Sugar Bowl is down the street from us. I say, if they could have put LSU and UCF in the Sugar Bowl, with that way, all the UCF people could have drove here.
Yep.
You know, the whole city would have picked up and came here. You know, but to put this game all the way over there, man, they got a lot of fans that are financially, stressed. This is after the holidays. Santa Claus done robbed everybody at gunpoint. Now you're going to try to have us go all the way across the country for a football game. So I wasn't happy about that. And we're losing players to the draft.
Yeah.
And the LSU secondary, right, is right now, that's about 4 players that we can't count on. And I sent the email, a message earlier. I said, hey, look, y'all need me to suit up. I'm here, probably about a 5'4" and a 40, but I can do a little something. But I think it's going to come down to that, man, because, Clyde is kept we're thin now. We went from a position of strength in our secondary to, we have the experience. We just don't have the depth because of the draft, and now we have 2 additional suspensions.
Yeah. Well, that's going to help us wear you guys out. So,
if something is looking up for you guys, man, if somebody goes down, it becomes scary for us because we don't have a whole lot, experienced secondary players. We're going to be thin.
Yeah. Well,
not making no excuse.
No,
not making no excuse.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we're going to be thin coming into that area.
Right. So, all in all, with everything that we've said, we've talked about all this, I think. How is this thing going to turn out? Knowing what you know both of these teams very well, I'll say it again. How do you think that this is going to turn out?
I got to go with my Tigers. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring. If it's a low scoring game, we win that. Our team, with the exception of Texas A&M, we haven't given up a lot of points, not even to Alabama. And we give up, 30 points. UCF has put up, 40 points several times this season. So if we can keep this game, we can keep them under control. And
I believe. Just let me fill this in real quick. I believe that we're at more than 30 points for 25 games.
There we go. That is your average. If we can keep UCF under 30 points, we win this game. We cannot get in a shootout with them. Because that's what you guys do. You are shootout guys, It's pow, 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 And we don't want to get into that with you guys. We want to control the clock, slow you down, break your rhythm, keep that offense on the bench, and that's going to be the game plan, And so I have this thing, 28-24, LSU.
Oh, wow. Well, that would hurt. That would definitely hurt. Well, I'm going to say that I hope that that's not what happens, obviously. So
it's just horrible, bro. It's like I said, it's like having 2 sons. It's like being, Archie Manning, and you got, one son, Archie, and it's like, that is hard for me, man, because like I said, I love my Tigers, and the next team I love is UCF football.
Well, so you'll be happy either way, right?
For UCF, if UCF gets this game, I'm happy for UCF going for it. Not for my Tigers losing to them, but you guys would really help me, prove a lot of points out there that on, any given Saturday.
Yeah.
Anybody can get it. Anybody can get it on any given Saturday. And we have to change the system and decide football on a football field and not a panel, trying to determine who they want to see.
Yeah.
Because I've had people telling me, man, nobody don't want to see them. Nobody don't want to see UCF. I said, listen to me. If Southern University in New Orleans, right? Southern University in Baton Rouge gets into the NCAA tournament and they pull Duke, big, bad monster Duke, at least they have an opportunity to beat Duke.
Yep.
That's not the case here.
Yeah. And that's, imagine if UCF, with what they've built, had the money from TV, number one, and were able to recruit the 4 and 5 star players that they can't get. Every once in a while we'll get a 4, but never a 5. Can't even get 1. Imagine if we were in a conference, and you have been on the bandwagon for this as well and trying to help us out with this. Imagine if we had the opportunities that, SEC, ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12 has. I think that we would, it may take us a couple of years, but I think that we would catch up, and we would be just as a formidable team as we are now where we're at. So
I don't think you're that far behind, though, man. You look at it, you guys beat Auburn with several unranked players. I'm not a big fan of this. I don't believe in the star system. I don't believe that these stars are what they say they are, but I do understand that that's how they rank recruiting classes.
Right.
But if a team has if Alabama has their own rival site and LSU has their own rival guy and Ole Miss have a rival guy, these guys can just deal out these stars, like blackjack. You guys beat Auburn with some players that wasn't even ranked.
And yeah, that's what we've built our team on, is guys that 3 stars and below. And look at how many of the guys from our team are in the NFL and
they
doing,
can flat out play.
Yeah, doing really well. So
they can flat out. You put a wide receiver win the first round.
Yeah.
To Minnesota.
Yep. That was a corner, but yeah.
First round.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about, man. That I don't believe that they are that far off. Yeah, we're recruiting. But we're recruiting people that Rivals website is telling coaches to recruit. I've highlighted high school kids, man, on my Twitter page.
Right.
That are unranked. I don't know if you had a chance to see some of these kids, man. I got a kid in Louisiana named JJ Sims that I put on my page. Go check him out. His name JJ Sims. This young man doesn't have any stars. And I'm up against the gun because I'm helping him as a senior. He doesn't have any stars. He doesn't have any offers, and this is bizarre, man. But a young man like that would go to a team like UCF and contribute,
Right.
And really that's how you guys built that team. I don't think they should change it. I think you should keep beating the crap out of people with what you're doing. Don't chase a lot of these IMG, guys, man. We get a lot of these guys who come from, places like this, these big 5-star guys, and they'll be with us for a year and transfer.
Right.
In a lot of cases, they're not worth it. Especially when you guys are rewarding the kids within the state. The kids, 4 high schools over are getting a chance to shine on a national level. And I think you should stay there, because if LSU is coming to Florida to find kids, there's something special about Florida, right? And you don't have to do that. Keep beating them with the formula that you have and change college football.
Well, I would love that, and I hope that somehow is possible one of these days for them to actually take UCF seriously, because obviously they're not. Hey,
but
man,
start all of that after this week.
I hope so. We'll see.
Everything I just said is for after this week, all right?
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but thank you very much for being a supporter of our program and being a supporter of our show and coming on anytime I want you to and being accessible, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, I'm here for you guys, and, it's going to be a hard one for me. And that's why I told UCF fans, man, we're just going to make it a big family reunion. And, and just pray all of these kids come out of this thing healthy.
Absolutely.
And that's a win overall.
Yep, that's the most important thing. It's
Absolutely.
We've had too much of that this year, just with one guy. So
Absolutely.
But he's there, and he's actually in Phoenix right now, our quarterback, Mackenzie Milton, and he's going to be on the sideline cheering our team on. So that's
awesome.
A big deal, too.
Yes.
All right, man. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hey, not a problem, brother. Anytime.
All right, thanks to our guests for helping Knightline provide the most in-depth coverage of the New Year's Day matchup between UCF and LSU. And real quick here, I want to give a shout-out and a very heartfelt thanks to our sponsors, Travis Dever of the Dever team, Kyle Israel and the Little Greek, the law offices of Chad Barr, Tasty Gravy Creative, the Scouted Team, and Axis Football. And also thank you very much, Trace Trylko, Adam Eaton, and UCF Mike from the Sons of UCF. And last, but certainly not least, if you're hearing my voice right now, you are the most important. I've said it 1,000,000 times. We do this for you, Night Nation. Thank you very much for listening. For Trace Trylko, I'm Andrew Phegley. Thanks for listening to this UCF Fiesta edition of Knightline Extra. Go Knights, charge on, be safe, and Happy New Year.